Hello and welcome to episode 326 of the Freelancers Show. Today on our panel we have Erik Dietrich.
Hey everybody.
And I'm Jonathan Stark. And the idea for this week, or the topic for this week, is creating leverage with systems. So I think we both use systems in our business. It kind of sounds silly to say it out loud, actually. Like, of course you would, but I know that most people, if they have any systems at all in their business, they're kind of few and far between.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at Sentry.io.
Have you, what do you think the best way to start talking about this is? Like, do you have particular systems that you use all the time? Are there particular areas of your business that you think lend themselves most to systems? Why do you add systems to your business? What does leverage even mean? What do you think you want to start with?
Well, so for me, I'm thinking of existing systems that I have, or what motivates me to create systems in the business. And the biggest driver for me personally with Hit Subscribe, our content business, has been to make it so that people other than me can take over certain aspects of things. So that has been absolutely the primary driver, is to identify what is kind of the magic or the secret sauce that I do versus what are things that a VA or later an employee could do. And then when I make that distinction, to create something so that they're not just starting from scratch, or that we're not, doing a pure knowledge transfer, but like, here, read this or watch this video I created. And then, let's go over a couple times, come to me with any questions. So I think for me, that's the single biggest motivator, if you will, the driver to this behavior. But I will say also that once you start doing this, at least for me, it's kind of infectious, and you start to say, like, what else could benefit from this sort of thinking and this sort of organization?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I've had the exact same experience where I'm mostly a lone wolf. I recently got a VA, which has been fabulous, but and I, do hand off things to her that are relatively systematic. Although, to be honest, I let her create her own systems because they were new things that I was doing in the business that I wasn't doing before. So I was like, I don't need to micromanage this. You're smarter at, like my YouTube channel. I'm like, you're smarter at YouTube than I am. You just come up with a process and let me know what it is. And that's been great. So I didn't even have to come up with a system for that. But before that, I had a couple, when I started doing group coaching, the way I run it has a Slack room with an onboarding process that I like to go through with each person who joins, and also and every other week we have a video call, and there's a certain process to that. And in fact, there's a whole process to the way the sale works and all the things that happen there. So almost by default, the sale piece had an automation to it because it happens in Moonclerk, and then it sends them an email so they have access to the Slack room, and there's a link that they use to join the Slack room. So that was kind of, I set up an automation. So in a sense, there's a process, although it's not documented. But then there's like an onboarding piece that I couldn't come up with an easy way to automate. So I said, well, I created some keyboard shortcuts for myself. Like every time, the Slack bot alerts me that someone joined via a link, I get a notification, and then I have this process. It's like a, really a two-step process. Very simple. It's a small process, but it's always the same, where I go in, it's like, welcome the person. I say, here's a list of 5 things that you should do now that you're here. And, one of them is read the orientation, and I set up your profile. It's just this keyboard shortcut that I paste in there. And so it's like a funny little, it's the tiniest little thing, but it takes away, I just don't have to think about it anymore. It was something I had to think about every time. And then I was like, oh man, it's like such a small thing, but it feels so much better. What else can I do? And then I was like, man, doing those weekly, every other week phone calls, video calls, there's really quite a few things I need to do for it to not be screwed up or to, less than good. So if I want to reliably produce good results on that video call and be able to do it regularly without thinking about it, I was like, man, I should just start writing this down. And I have a sort of an SOP or a run book of, it's probably got 30 or 40 items on it, like T minus 60 minutes, do these 5 things, T minus 30 minutes, do these 5 things. When the call starts, make sure you do X, Y, and Z, quit Slack, turn off notifications, mute your phone, dust off your shirt so there's not like a giant piece of hair on your shoulder or something, and then over time having this, and then after the thing's over, here are these steps to go through, and, there's probably 25 steps after the session's over to follow up, create the next session. It's like a lot of stuff, and to remember it was problematic. It was stressful. It felt like I was reinventing the wheel every single time I did it. And there was no good way for me to reliably improve the experience for anybody because I didn't have the information captured anywhere. So I started writing it down. And every time I run through a session, I have it's a simple text document. I have it up in front of me. And I, importantly, as things change or as I come up with better ideas or something that doesn't really need to be done anymore, I can modify the SOP so that the next time I do it, I'm sort of benefiting. I don't have to remember anything. I can just read it, and I don't have to think about the mechanics of doing the session. I can just focus on answering the questions, which is the core value proposition. Like that's the core piece. And all of the administrative stuff around it, it's like, I could outsource some of it, but it's got to be done. And I don't want to think about that. I don't want to waste energy on that.
Yeah, so I think people listening to this, if you've never done something like this before, it might seem like the primary goal is time savings, and that certainly can be a goal. But I think you'd find yourself amazed at the other benefits that you realize, one of which is like creating a consistent experience. Like, you were talking about having to remember like 30 or so things or whatever the number was. That's a lot of things. So what inevitably happens is nobody can keep all that in their head. So you'll do 26 of them for, oops, those didn't happen this time. Versus if you've got it all written down, documented, and you really have a playbook here, you're doing all 30 of those things every time. It creates a very consistent experience, which I think translates for a lot of people consuming a product or service to very high quality. So I've found all sorts of benefits. There's, the bus factor benefit. There's the time savings, creating a consistent experience, and kind of in a sense establishing, it's a little strong, I guess, to call it values, but like in the way we do this, we do X, Y, and Z kind of establishes not just what you do and not just that consistency of experience, but like, we or I believe that this is how this thing is done. So I've found that there's a lot of upside to it in a variety of ways. Have you had a similar experience?
Oh, 100%. And I'll add in that it dramatically decreased my stress level when I was going to run one of these things. Like I don't get stressed out at all. I can show up like, not last minute, but I don't have to like sit there and think, it's night and day. Like where before I'd be like, oh, I've got a session this afternoon. I really got to, get into the office early and like figure out what I'm going to do. And it's not like that at all. Now I roll in with, 45 minutes or an hour early. And I just run through the steps, and I give myself ample time to do it. I can do all the preliminary steps. I can do in about 15 minutes if I'm in a pinch. But, to have an hour is nice. I usually come in, I've got my coffee or whatever, and I'm kind of like chilling. And it's just, I just follow my own instructions. It's like I'm not making a single decision leading up to that going live, not a single one. And it's just dramatically decreases my stress level. And in fact, I would probably not be doing it anymore. I probably would have canceled discontinued the product if I was still having to like think every single time, remember all those, whatever it is, 30, 40, 50 steps. And it just would have been unsustainable. And the recurring nature of it really highlighted this this upside, or sort of the benefits of spending the time to create the lever. Because if you think about the analogy, like leverage, you have a lever and a fulcrum, and you use the lever to essentially lift something that you wouldn't normally be able to lift. And it takes time to create the lever. Like, you got to build the thing, but really it's not that hard. And the benefits, it's exactly like you said. There are all of these benefits that you wouldn't even think of. Certainly, the thing that probably got me to do it initially was the time savings and the stress decrease, and like the feeling like I was just kind of winging it every time. It didn't feel like I didn't want to wing it. To your values point, I didn't want to wing it. People were paying me money for this, and I wanted it to be good every time. So I came up with this procedure, and then I got addicted to it, and I started noticing other places where there's another kind of place where I really notice it strongly when I've got something that I have to do, that I know I have to do, but it's not that frequent. And I'm like, I catch myself like, this is the second time I've done this. I'm going to forget how I did it. And then I have to rethink all of these same thoughts I'm thinking right now if I don't write this down. Like, yeah. I know I'm going to have to, the other day it was like, I'm helping my wife with like a Shopify store thing, and it's not my wheelhouse. It's never going to stick in my mind. So if I don't write it down, every single time I'm going to have to like remember everything that I painstakingly learned the last time. And it's just like this it's like the same pain over and over again. So like, why not just record the experience while you're going through it, if you know it's going to happen again, even if it's not on a regular basis?
I used to, years and years ago, I just had a flashback when I didn't have any semblance of an idea of what content marketing does. And I had a blog that was like truly a weblog. I would often write that sort of thing on the blog just to say, like, I'm going to Google this later. But so, I could go to my own blog and look this up. Yeah. There's a lot of early content that was like that. I mean, I would make some effort to make it hopefully interesting to somebody, but that drove a lot of early blog entries. But it does make me think now of an element to this kind of standard operating procedure with a business is, depending on the nature, I guess, of the business and what you're doing, this is something that's occurring to me more and more, is I could gather up these playbooks that I'm creating for the business and probably build them fairly easily into an info product. Like, we're doing a lot of them around how to, because Hit Subscribe does blog content, how to create a blog post, how to do quality assurance on one, how to copy edit one, how to refurbish one, that's 2-3 years out of date, all this stuff. It'd be fairly easy to take all that knowledge and, sometimes I do YouTube videos about it, but to take that and actually sell it, which is something we might look at later. So that sort of institutional knowledge can have external value itself, like whether you're looking to franchise a business or whether you're looking to, just kind of sell a how-to for DIYers. Mm-hmm. So there's an interesting potential upside there. I haven't personally realized it yet, but I feel like it's not too much of a stretch.
Sure, you're creating intellectual property, and the process of that time savings that it creates, or even the instructions of how to do it. So like, some people might know how to do it, but they don't have the process down, or they might know what the ingredients are, but they don't know the recipe. Like, how do I combine these ingredients? And it's absolutely valuable. And if you were, I think it's sort of a more sophisticated way to look at the idea of creating standard operating procedures. But if you were going to get to a point where you wanted to sell your business for whatever reason, you're getting older, or you had a health scare or something like that, or you just want to do something different and not just throw away your old business, if you don't have repeatable procedures and systems in place, like, and you're a soloist, like, what are you selling? There's nothing to sell. So yeah. Very, very little anyway. So I actually did an interview on Ditching Hourly with John Warlow, who wrote a book called Built to Sell, where he sort of tells an allegory about fictitious person who runs a design firm, and how that person works with a mentor to systemize the business and create some productized services to actually create some value. Ultimately in the book, well, a spoiler, at the end of the book, you could still decide to sell or not sell, but the fact of the matter is you've created a better product and you can make more money with less work, which, if you're not trading time for money, even if you are trading time for money, you stand to benefit from this. But if you're not trading time for money, or you've got at least a couple of one or two products or productized services that are in addition to whatever hourly work you're doing, then creating processes to do those at market, deliver, and maintain those things, it's pure profit. It like translates to pure profit because you're decreasing your labor intensity, you're gaining back valuable personal time and selling a better product potentially for a higher price.
Yeah, that I've actually read that book or listened to it. My wife and I, because she's the co-founder of the business Hit Subscribe With Me, that was kind of interestingly timed. It was maybe a year ago that we were reading this, and the nature of what we're doing, which is creating blog posts for clients, creating content for clients, is so kind of by its nature lends itself to agency type work. But we had listened to that book and have always tried to make a point to figure out how we can be more productized servicey, which involves having, internal intellectual property, things that you're doing. And a big focus or a big takeaway of mine from that book was if you're thinking in terms of evaluation of your business, it's really hard to value an agency if all you're selling is labor and all that labor walks away at 5 p.m. every day. So the difference between kind of an unvaluable agency and a business that you could sell for a nice multiplier or just, probably enjoy operating more than you otherwise would is those operating procedures, that kind of unique stuff that you bring to the game. But it was the 5-step logo design process, I think.
Right. Yeah, something like that.
Memory serves.
Right. Yeah, it's super interesting. And like I said, even if you are, it's funny, the mechanics of hourly billing, because if you figure out how to do things faster and more efficiently, it's going to have a negative impact on your income, which is one of the, is a telltale sign that hourly billing is a weird thing to do. But there are other aspects of your life and business that even if you are billing by the hour, you stand to benefit from, so whether it's the administrative things that you do, sending invoices, or even just getting into the office in the morning, those sorts of things, it's dramatic. It's dramatic, the effect that it has. And I'm actually running right now. Dear listener, when you hear this, it'll already be too late to join this, but I'll run another one in the future. But right now I'm running a 10-day challenge, systems challenge for, we've got like 300 people in a Slack room, and every day we're doing I'm sort of publishing a different challenge to get people thinking more systematically about, what can they systematize, what can they turn into a process, and kind of experience the benefits of doing this in a way that will get them hooked. Like that's the idea, is I'm trying to get them hooked on the idea. And so if you're thinking about maybe a couple of steps to take, one of the way that I start the challenge off is really eye-opening. It has been very eye-opening for people. It starts off by tracking everything you do for 24 hours. Work and business, work and personal, everything. Like from the time you get up until the time you go to bed and the next morning, whatever the 24-hour period is, maybe even go a little longer. But it has the same effect on everyone. One of the things that everybody notices is that they are doing an insane amount of context switching. So like every time a progress bar comes up on your on their computer, they reach for their phone to get on Instagram and wait for the 60-second progress bar to finish, or they're halfway through something and they interrupt themselves to do something else. And I still do this really bad sometimes, where I'm like, I need to go downstairs and get more coffee pods because we're out of coffee pods. And I go downstairs and I see the kids left some food down here. So I'm grab the food, bring it back upstairs. I totally forgot to get the coffee pods. And or walk upstairs 5 times before I leave the house because I forgot to brush my teeth. I forgot to put, I'm going to wear socks. It's kind of cold out, whatever. And when you write all that down, it's kind of like, I equate it to taking your junk drawer and just sort of turning it upside down in the kitchen floor and being like, all right, what all's in here? Let me separate out first the junk from the useful stuff. get rid of the junk, and then I'm going to organize what's left in, and it's a lot less stuff. Usually it's less stuff, and you've got more space to organize it, so it's easier to organize. And once you sort of got that list of all the stuff you do, you can sort of cherry pick what the low-hanging fruit is. Like, oh, my morning routine is a disaster. I'm gonna like go nuts just as a fun project, like totally organize my morning routine so I don't have to improvise it every single morning. Like first I shave, then I get, or do it the other way around, or like, should I brush my teeth before I put my shirt on or after? Like all these things. Yeah. It's comical when you think about it, but almost nobody has, not nobody, but almost nobody. Let's say the majority of people don't have a specific routine for things they do every single day. What do you do about breakfast? What do you do about your commute? All of these things. And then once we kind of have that groundwork and that feeling of like, wow, because, we start with daily activities because the very next day you've got this new process, and then like, ooh, that was so different. And then now we start thinking about, okay, let's apply this to things at work. What do you do at work every day? What things do you do every week? What things do you do every month? What happens only once a year? Why don't you have these things written down? It's going to repeat. What we just did taxes. Like what do you need to do? When does it have to happen? What do you need to have prepared? So it's what's going to happen. It's going to happen. It is. So why not have fun, like creating a system for it? It's some pushback that you get is like, well, it'll take me so long to create and maintain the system that it'll actually be a net negative on the time or whatever. It's just not true. Like there's so many benefits to not having to reinvent the wheel every time you go to do a thing that it's just fun. I don't know. Maybe I'm weird. Maybe you and I are weird and it's just fun, but it is fun. It's like, oh, it feels like, it's like switching from firefighter mode to fire prevention mode.
Hey folks, let me tell you about a really cool thing. It's the .tech domains. Listen, you work in tech, I work in tech. We all do things that affect technology. So why not have it reflected in our domain names? If you head over to get.tech or head over to your favorite domain registrar, you can pick up a .tech domain right now. In fact, if you want to get show notes for this show, you can check them out at freelancershow.tech.
It strikes me too that there's a lot of tie-in with something I've often said in a consulting capacity is you have to get a process documented first, and then you have to make sure that the process makes sense and that it's worth doing. And that's when you can automate it. Like only then should we be talking about writing some code or whatever. We don't want to automate anything that is a mess, because then you're just going to have a more efficient mess, I guess.
100%. Yes, true.
So this is absolutely the first couple of steps in that. Now, I've never actually thought about trying to apply it to my personal routines or anything, but like I'm thinking just of a random example. Like if when I go jogging, I put on jogging clothes, stretch out, I put on headphones, queue up my phone and some podcasts, something like that. I never do any of that in any specific order. Mm-hmm. But if I thought about it, like maybe there would be an optimum order to do it in. Now, to take it further, I don't know what or how I would automate, but it's interesting to have that line of thought. Like, well, okay, I've kind of optimized this. I feel pretty good that this is a good way to do things. Now, how can I make this even better or more effective?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to result in automation, because you're still going to get lots of benefits. Like, and I've got a similar thing. I haven't. This is like my next target for systemization is I take the kid. I have two little kids, and the two of them and I all take karate classes on. Usually we go Wednesdays and Thursdays, and the combination of me having to leave work early, get home, get them dressed, make sure I've got all of their sort of accoutrement, and because you don't want to get there and not have their belt or not have their uniform or whatever, or the uniform's dirty or their nails should have been trimmed, or like there's all these things. Like once you get there, it's too late. You need all of this stuff, and that sort of frantic panic that happens twice a week, every week is I mean, first world problems, but it's like a drain. It's an emotional drain, and it makes me not enjoy the experience as much as I could. And it also stresses me out, like the last hour or two of work when it's coming up. I'm like, oh, I hope the geese are clean, stuff like that. And it's like, part of the process could be, like if we go Wednesday and Thursday, then Friday, like everything goes in the laundry. It gets packed in the gym bags Friday night. So put it in the back of the car so that I know it's there on the following Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever we go that week. And you don't even have to think about it. And decreasing the number of things you have to think about, especially when they're just rote mechanical. These are not things that I'm getting intense pleasure out of. It's not like the creative process, like when I'm writing or playing guitar or something. It's like, it's something that I don't get any joy out of experiencing, like putting the karate stuff in the car, right? So I just want it to happen. I want to be able to snap my fingers and it magically is there. So there's all ways to improve that. There's no way I'm going to automate any of that or even outsource any of that. But having a sort of a plan or a procedure for it that is proactive and sort of sets us up for success, so to speak, is, like I said, that's my next target. It's chaotic because the kids are involved, but it's totally doable.
That's it makes me think of Getting Things Done, and it's been a few years since I read it, but like, where such a source of like cognitive stress is that feeling that you thought of something or you should be doing something, but you can't remember what it is. And so you wind up, like I've created through Trello, all these systems where if I think of something I need to do, I just write it down immediately. And the amount of burden that's taken off my day-to-day life is pretty significant, because for me, I don't get that feeling very often, if at all anymore, like, hey, I should be doing something. But in specific cases, like in the business, or like what you were talking about, the process for getting ready for karate, or if it's getting ready to do a presentation or a podcast or whatever it may be, there are kind of micro things like that. So it's almost like you could look for these leverage opportunities by kind of investigating in your own life, like what creates this stress, this like cognitive weight when it's coming up. It's almost like you're entertaining and a bunch of people are coming over and you're kind of running around in a manic sense, like trying to get everything ready. Like, are there things like that in your business? Because if so, you might have a great opportunity to make your own life a lot easier.
Yeah, you could either, like the junk drawer example, there might be stuff that's just not worth doing at all, and you could just stop doing it. And if you decide that you do want to keep doing it, like, why not organize it? So you just mentioned Trello, though. I'd love to shift gears a little bit and talk about how to, if you're going to create these sort of systems, like, where do you put them? How do you not lose them? What format do you use? What's the most efficient way to put them together and keep them updated? So maybe you've got some examples from your business or life where you've done that. I certainly have a few I can contribute also.
For the business, the main place that I have that is in a series of Google Docs that I share with, there's 4 of us that work for the business full time and then a bunch of contractors. So we have those in a place where they're relatively easy to find. The thing that I do when creating these templates is at the top, I kind of I'll put a bullet or 2 in where I say, these are the goals of this process. So like I have one for how we do like follow-up after a sales call, for instance. Mm-hmm. And I say, like, here's some overarching principles, which is we're an inbound content marketing business, so we don't want to bang people over the head and be annoying. Right. So that like informs the number of follow-up emails we'll send. So there's a few kind of goals or, quick principles. And then it's a very clear set of instructions that are almost like waiting to be automated where applicable, just like bullets in order. So business-wise, that's kind of what's developed. I don't know if by any means this is optimal, but it kind of started under the general idea that doing something is better than doing nothing. So I'd be interested to hear what you're doing, and if you have, I guess, thoughts on better ways to gather this, because while this works for us, I'm certainly open to other ideas.
Yeah, I think the Google Docs / Word doc centrally hosted is a really good mix of editable and clear. So on the one hand, I've in the past, especially doing handoff after a software project is done, when a new developer, like an internal developer, is going to take over, or I'm releasing a system to a bunch of users that are going to use it, and I'm going to go on to the next thing. I've always loved screencasts and videos for that sort of thing because they transmit a crazy, crazy high amount of information with a very, very low amount of effort. So I can just sort of like walk through the interface or walk through the code repository, kind of talking extemporaneously as I go through and point things out, and then deliver that. And it's just massively valuable. The problem with it is updating video is super tedious.
Yeah.
So one of the things about SOPs that I find really important is that you build into the process that it is maintained. Otherwise, it gets out of date and people stop using it. So I find a text format to be the easiest to edit. And for things that I just do for myself, I just do bullet points in like a plain text document, and I keep them in a particular place on my hard drive on my computer. And it's in Dropbox, so I could access it from other computers. But they're just for myself, and I probably have a half a dozen in there. So like how I record a solo podcast episode, how I record an episode of Business of Authority where I have a co-host, how to do a guest interview, the information that I would send to a guest about the show in advance. I have ones for creating YouTube videos, ones for recording videos for the pricing seminar, so on and so forth. So like any kind of media production stuff, I have had a tendency to create these bulleted lists that, goes step by step through. So format wise, I just use plain text. Occasionally I'll include a hyperlink to, for example, at the end of my process for running a group coaching session, at the end of the session, I go through and it's something I theoretically could automate, but I haven't yet, where I go through and say, like, anybody who's unsubscribed in the last month, the session that just happened would have been the last one that they would be entitled to join. So I go through and like just look for anybody that unsubscribed over a month ago, and I remove them from Slack. So it has a hyperlink where I can click straight on it to go to the spot in my email that shows me any unsubscribes, and if there have been any in the last month, then I click over to Slack to manage the users there. So there are a couple, but it's very basic. It's mostly just text, couple of hyperlinks, and occasionally when I'm handing something off to someone else to do it for me, where it's not, something might not be completely obvious, I'll do a short video snippet or a screenshot with like arrows and circles. Say like, this is the box you need to check inside of Simplecast to make sure that the episode goes live at the particular time or whatever.
Yeah, I like the discrete video chunks bit. That makes sense. I mean, the keeping things editable is so important, at least for me, because some of them become pretty stable with time, these documents that we have, but especially when they're new, and with others, there's a lot of evolving thought on the matter, like topic research for blog posts. So you're going to be changing them a lot. And if it's a very discrete kind of thing, like, here's how to log into WordPress or something, you can figure that'll age well. But if I did a video recording of the whole process, that would get pretty brutal to maintain, I think. Yeah. One thing I do with these, speaking of video, though, is a snapshot in time almost. They're serving to make for good foundations for YouTube content, for Hit Subscribe's YouTube channel, and then things like blog posts and stuff. So that kind of medium, to me, doesn't necessarily need to age quite as well, because it's not meant to, drive your business. But you can still be helpful and kind of generate content from these things, because it's almost certainly useful for people in your prospective audience. You as a business offer X, and so you're kind of producing this content on authoritative content on how one goes about producing X. Mm-hmm. So I think there's some real, content marketing potential there too.
Yes, absolutely. I can add one thing on the video concept. I've done this in the past. I'll probably do it some more in the future too, especially as I ramp up with my VA and start handing off more things to her, where I'm not sure what I do when let's just say it's record like a episode of the Freelancers Show. Maybe it's like I just sort of know and just sort of do it. But if I were to like just from memory write down the stuff, I would leave out tons of stuff. Mm-hmm. So the handoff would be really weak. And what I've done in the past for really complex things, like not just, is especially for shows where I do the audio editing and I want to hand that off, then I've made a video of the entire process, and then I go back through and I use the video to remind myself everything I do, in what order, and I'll write that all down. And if I want to take a screenshot, I just pause the video of that particular situation and I take a screenshot there, and then add that to the SOP. And then I don't actually use the video. I don't hand off the video because I know that's going to get out of date. I'll just take that and just use it as a like, well, what, an answer to the question, wait, what exactly do I do? And then I would get rid of it. And then I can look at the list, the text list with the sort of individual, any screenshots that I've got in there, or even like a small video chunks. And then I can say like, you know what, it would really be better if I did step 3 as step 2 and like flip flop steps 3 and 2, because step 3, I have to wait. And if I do it as step 2 instead, I can actually be doing step 2 while I'm waiting for the video to export or whatever. So I can kind of shuffle things around more easily in a text document, but still retain the sort of multimedia experience by just taking screenshots of the sort of discovery video, if you want to call it that.
That is a great idea. I may have to steal that. I like that. I mean, it's a very efficient, I'm going to capture and make sure I'm getting this right with the video. I've got an instant source for screenshots. It's kind of throwaway, so I'm not worried about maintenance, because I could see if you have enough of these standard operating procedures, maintenance becoming a real headache. So that is a truly good idea. I like that.
Cool. What else could we talk about here? I don't feel like we need to beat it into the ground too much.
I'm wondering if so if you're out there listening and you've just gone freelance, it might seem like this is maybe a bridge too far. Like, I write JavaScript and I get paid by the hour to do it. What are you talking about? Standard operating procedures? Like that doesn't even apply to me. What would you say in response to that? Since it sounds like you're working with people in that situation to help them do it, I'm just curious, like, how would you lay the groundwork for someone to get started with this?
Yeah, great question. I've got a perfect example. So I've got a particular dev environment set up for this. This is going years back, but I still use it occasionally. This particular dev environment set up where it had like it was like I needed to do work for this client occasionally, but not all the time. It wasn't like every morning or something. I couldn't leave my environment set up. Let's put it like that. And what I did was I created a keyboard shortcut inside of A-text, which is like text expander type of thing, that had this sort of chain of command line commands that would allow me to do this thing. So like, in the morning when you come in, let's say you're doing JavaScript for multiple different clients. They've got different repos set up. They've got different rules around coding styles. They've got different repos, obviously, different private repos on GitHub. And you've got the switching between the clients can be a real pain. It's a place where I would find myself procrastinating a lot. Like, I'll just get lunch first and, whatever. So I created these text expander shortcuts where I just typed 3 characters and it would puke out this long sort of chain of commands to the command line that would go to the right directory, pull the repo to make sure I had the latest, switch to the correct branch for this client, pull the latest changes to make sure that I had them, make sure I wasn't working on the wrong branch, open up the directory on my laptop so that it was the front window. It would open up a couple of URLs in Chrome so that all those things were set up. I didn't have to remember what they were. And it seems like a small thing, but it was that sort of shifting gears from client to client and then going back to that one and having to think about something that's not worth devoting mental energy to was a real drag. It would cause me to procrastinate. Now again, if you're billing by the hour, this is going to have a negative impact on your income because you would have started that timer at the beginning and when you're switching over to their environment or whatever. But it's such a drag. To me, it was like an annoying, stressful, emotional load, and it just caused me to put off doing the work usually. So I've got like this list of things that need to be done. Like, I'll get to that later. I don't feel like all the non-fun stuff. I love the coding part, but there's a whole bunch of things I have to do before I get to the coding. So, that's just one example of getting your environment set up or switching between different client environments without having to think at all. and then you can focus all of your energy on doing the actual work.
So it does really kind of highlight the essential paradox of hourly billing this way, which is if you're doing all that kind of environmental setup cruft, you know, and billing by the hour, you're doing that on the client's dime, and you don't have a lot of great incentive to stop doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think probably, you know, a lot of plays around efficiency and how you can do service delivery more efficiently start to make you scratch your head about billing these clients by the hour, because you don't have a lot of incentive to be efficient, you know, maybe just enough so that you're not perceived as a problem,
mm-hmm.
but
or the stuff that really just pains you to do inefficiently. A lot of software developers despise inefficiency. But there's almost always, I've never come across a situation where somebody didn't get way more efficient when they stopped billing for their time. But even outside of that, I mean, like, you're not billable 100% of the time. There are a lot of other things you do that are potentially, you know, that you're not getting paid for anyway. So you might as well decrease the amount of mental energy or time that you have to devote to them. Like, you know, certainly marketing activities like blogging or podcasts or all that stuff.
Sure.
You know, if you are going to a lot of conferences, I have a checklist for domestic travel, air travel, and international air travel that I don't want to think about it every time. I've got my suitcase all packed. My suitcase is right now. I'm not going anywhere. I have no trips planned. My suitcase is packed right now. And, you know, why not? Why do I have to think about that? It doesn't make any sense. So
that's actually true of me as well, for what it's worth. That's a like random connection moment. I also in the other room have a suitcase packed in case of consulting engagement.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, because I just don't want that overload. It's like the wrong time. You've got other things to think about in that moment. So the last thing you want to do is be stressing out about, like, did I pack a belt? You know, it's just dumb.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there are lots of things that sort of surround, even if you're billing by the hour, there are lots of things that surround your billable work that you probably don't enjoy, and you would not enjoy them less. Is that how to say that? You despise them less if you didn't have to think about them. They just happened, whether or not they're automated or you do them like a robot following a script. They're both way better.
Yeah. Keeping the books, invoices, that kind of thing, I could definitely see it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, probably, you know, marketing, certainly, any kind of administrative stuff, onboarding new clients, client meetings, running design reviews. Like, do you do that differently every time? I doubt it. You know, like, write down a procedure. Here's the agenda. This is send the agenda to these people at this time. Have it. A lot of that stuff you can automate, but even if you can't automate it, it should be, you know, it shouldn't require brain power every time you go to do it.
Absolutely.
Cool. Do you want to switch over to picks?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
All right, cool. What do you got?
Let's see. This week, one of Hit Subscribe authors is going to do a webinar, actually for one of our clients, on containers as a service. So I'll throw that a pick. It should be good. I think it's coming up next week. Depending on publication time, you might have to hurry to sign up. So I'll do that one and hope we're not too late on it.
Cool.
I'm thinking a couple of books that I mentioned here during the course of this, or at least thought of. One was the aforementioned Getting Things Done. Since I talked about that, I'll give it a pick, and we'll put a link to that. And then the other one, I don't know if we talked about it directly, but all the conversation about standard operating procedures made me think of the E-Myth Revisited and kind of the idea of building your business to be something that you could franchise, even if you're not trying to franchise it. Mm-hmm. So if you want to kind of think a lot more about this stuff, I'll throw that out as a pick. That's a good read.
Cool. And I will re-mention Built to Sell by John Warlow, which is along these lines. Another one is that I'm reading now, but I'm already liking it, is called Work the System by Sam Carpenter is the author. And the audiobook is actually free. If you go to his website, you can get the audiobook and an ebook copy for free, or you can buy a hard copy on Amazon. So that's workthesystem.com. And I'll shout out a link to the 10-day system challenge that I'm running one now, so it's too late for that one, but I'm definitely going to be doing it again because people are just loving it. It's having great effects for folks. So you can go to systemschallenge.com to check that out. And next time I run one of those, I will send out an announcement to the list so you can sign up there. Cool. Well, that's it for this week. Nice tight episode. I hope you join us again next time for the Freelancers Show. Bye.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CacheFly.com to learn more.